Hey, what's up guys, Ruff here. So yesterday we got the official release of Bungie's Marathon, and the question on the minds of millions right now is whether or not this game is a flop. Did it fulfill the dreaded trilogy? Did it end up like Concord with a absolute instantaneous failure? Or Concord 2, aka Highguard, with a similar fate? Well, Concord 3, as some are suggesting, Marathon, well, we don't really know quite yet. Okay, the jury is not out on this, but right now, looking at the first 2 days and some of the reaction from Bungie and games journalists and players as well, suggests that things are not meeting the very high expectations that have been placed upon this title. Now, of course, we're off to a really bad start when not only are we seeing somewhat disappointing numbers, but also Bungie going out and heavily suggesting to media outlets that they wait on their reviews until late March, when just coincidentally a major patch is coming up. And then we see games journalists coming out and saying, this is not exactly the numbers they were expecting, and the player count is a bit concerning. You know it's a bit concerning when even games journalists are pointing this out. And of course, to make matters worse, to rub salt in the wound, on the same day as Marathon's release, an indie studio released Slay the Spire 2 that absolutely destroyed the player count of Marathon. Now, what about the actual player count? So on day 2, this is like midday. I would suspect this is going to be around the peak for the day. Marathon is sitting at 63,000 according to SteamDB. And if you look at the chart, they peaked on day 1 at about 88,000, which is not exactly the biggest number in the world. It's not atrocious. It's not Concord or anything like that, obviously. But with a game that's got hundreds of millions of dollars invested into it, is this going to be enough? Especially when we see a drop-off. I mean, again, we're still at 62,000, but that's still a roughly 25% decrease from day 1 to day 2. That's not exactly too promising. And again, with some estimates out there, people believe that this game needs to sell between 7 to 11 million copies just to break even. That is a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody is sitting here saying that Marathon's not going to sell millions of copies. It's going to. It's going to sell millions. But will it sell enough to even get to its budget or to make a profit? That is the main question. We're even seeing some very bold aspirations from Bungie. According to Paul Tassi, the studio's aiming for nothing less than a top 5 spots on Circana sales chart for the year if the game is to be considered a true success. All I can say to that is a very aspirational goal, and I wish them luck. That's going to be tough sledding for them. But upon release, there was endless articles promoting this game, and also studios coming out and congratulating Bungie and promoting their game, including those at Naughty Dog, saying a huge congratulations to Bungie on the launch of Marathon. But of course, there was another studio that announced this launch, but it went very differently. Slay the Spire 2 also launched on the same day as Marathon. This comes from the indie studio Mega Crits. And of course, like I said, they released Slay the Spire 2 same day as Marathon. And boy, would this tweet end up being one of the most unintentionally hilarious ones I've seen in a minute. Okay, so they say, congratulations to the Marathon team on their launch. Don't let small indie passion projects like this pass you by just because Slay the Spire 2 is out. Now, of course, they were trying to have a fun interaction here. This wasn't supposed to be any sort of promises or shots or anything, but Slay the Spire 2 absolutely crushed Marathon. Right now, you can compare the 60 or so thousand in-game players for Marathon versus the 227,000 in-game players for Slay the Spire 2. In fact, look at the all-time peak that occurred over the past 24 hours. 430,000 in-game players Look at this chart. This is beautiful. This is success. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we saw this with Mugenics, right? Day 1, good. Day 2, good, but rising. It's rising as the days go on, which is a very healthy sign. That is a hit, ladies and gentlemen. I believe this went way beyond any of their craziest expectations for this game. They completely crushed Marathon. I mean, it wasn't exactly a competition, but they more than quadrupled the max count for players in-game. I mean, that's pretty insane. In fact, it got so insane, one of the co-founders of the studio came out and said, "This seems a bit meaner than it was intended. To be fair, I didn't think we'd actually pass Marathon in concurrent users." And the replies to this are very funny. "Mogging a greedy corporation with no soul that's wearing a beloved name as a skin suit is a good thing. This you? I thought you were stronger. Pass, it's complete domination." That's like half of the peak count we would see just hours later. Germany versus Brazil type situation, exactly. In quotes, "I didn't think we'd actually pass Marathon in concurrent users," end quote. 3 a.m. my time, that's domination. Now, looking at this, I mean, games journalists, how could they not deny the success of this game? Quadrupling, more than quadrupling, Bungie's extraction shooter, Marathon. I mean, everyone is talking about this. And again, you have journalists coming out and looking at the numbers so far for Marathon and saying, yeah, it's a bit concerning. But of course, not every journalist is looking at the objective reality of what we know so far. We see the glazing and another kiss of death from PC game journalist Morgan Park. The meme has lived on. I don't know if this is just complete and utter incompetence, bad luck, or masterful trolling, or all of the above. Who knows? But let's read some of the previous headlines from this contributor at PC Gamer. Okay. "High guard is fine when you don't have an internet in your ear telling you it's nasty. 8 hours in, Suicide Squad doesn't seem like the disaster some were waiting for. Uh-oh, I played 7 hours of Concord this weekend and immediately want back in. After 5 hours of exploring the galaxy and ghosting past stormtroopers, Star Wars Outlaws is finally winning me over. I played 6 hours of Assassin's Creed Shadows, and folks, I think this one was worth the wait." And of course, they came out with the most recent one. "The Marathon server slam consumed my weekend. 21 hours later, I've gone from meh to believer. All right, Bungie, I'm in." Yeah, this is literally a kiss of death. This is pattern recognition at this point, ladies and gentlemen. Every time this individual journalist makes some sort of I played X amount of hours of said game, and now I'm a believer or fan, whenever they make that type of a post, it is followed by a massive disappointment in terms of sales and player numbers, and then eventually the studio either shutting down or at least taking massive damage. And here we are with Marathon as the latest example, and yeah, not great, ladies and gentlemen. What's also not great is this right here. It looks like Bungie has come out and addressed the embargo and gameplay guidelines for reviewers, especially in the media, asking critics and reviewers to hold off on publishing full Marathon reviews until later in March. Interesting. That's when the game's endgame zone becomes available. So they're basically saying, hold on until the game gets good. Now, Paul Tassi, games journalist who's been making a lot of sense with his coverage of Marathon, goes on to say, they're absolutely doing this to avoid another Destiny situation where it had a bunch of scored reviews in before Vault of Glass, its best piece of content, actually dropped. But as they say, this is not a demand or embargo mandate. That is correct. It is a heavy suggestion, let's just say. And if you're one of these platforms, one of these sets of games journalists, and you need benefits and a good relationship with Bungie, You want benefits like early access, for example? Are you going to defy this request and make them angry at you? I don't really know, ladies and gentlemen. It might be against their own interests. So that's why people might feel like this is a little bit less of an ask and more of a heavy suggestion. But of course, with the marathon roadmap, why are they making people wait? Well, in late March, they have a lot of content coming out and a major updates at the beginning of April. So I guess they are trying to wait this out. They're basically saying, no, don't review the game quite yet. It gets good in a month or two. That's not a very winning strategy, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not really convinced that's exactly what gamers want to hear. That's not very promising. And Endymion points out here, this is a terrible look. This is like asking movie reviewers not to review a movie until the extended cut is out. Marathon should be reviewed based on what's available at launch in its initial release, not what comes later. Even if Bungie isn't saying flat out it's mandatory, knowing games journalists, they'll likely wait off so they don't get alienated by their peers. Very disappointing to see, and I entirely agree with this take right here. And also people are pointing out some other interesting things going on. Pointing out here, I'm sure Bungie is not buying reviews for Marathon at all. So people are skeptical about the reviews on Steam for Marathon. And I think there's something interesting to observe here. As of today, and when this tweet was posted, with Marathon, the peak was 88k players, but there's 5.1k reviews. With Slay the Spire 2, who had a peak of 430,000 players, well over 4 times Marathon's player count, but they have less reviews. Now, of course, I understand that Marathon is a controversial game. It's got a lot of hype and a lot of attention on it, and whether it does good or bad, people are more inclined to talk about it than the average game that just dropped on Steam. But the number of reviews versus the number of players actually engaging, when you compare it to other games, like, for example, Slay the Spire 2, it seems a bit off. And I understand why people would be a bit skeptical of what's actually going on here. But of course, it wasn't just games journalists and others who were trying to do something with this mess. There was a lot of copium going on with people defending this game on social media, referring to the fact that users are pointing out that hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on Marathon just to be mogged by Slay the Spire 2 and Resident Evil. And they reply by saying, are y'all okay? The Steam reviews are very positive, so it's obvious the people that are actually playing it are enjoying it. It literally has a fire icon next to it, but let's compare a new IP to an established IP. Shaking my head, anything for engagement, I guess. Well, first of all, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure the little fire icon that you're seeing right here, I'm pretty sure they give that to a game that just hit its all-time peak player count. So if you're taking the screenshot of a game on day one, it's certainly going to have its peak count at the time. And that only makes sense, right? But overall, people are responding by saying, nah, we're not going to sit here and pretend that an indie game outperforming a huge AAA game is not a big deal. And I agree. I think it's a very big deal. I don't understand why anybody would look at this absolute domination from Slay the Spire 2 versus Marathon and think this is not something worthy of any serious attention. I think it's a very big deal, and it's very telling about the state of AAA games right now. And of course, we're seeing some copium from, this time, Shroud, when asked if this game is dying in a month or two, and this is what he had to say.
Is this game dying in a month or two or not? Definitely not. There's literally, that's not going to happen. They've invested too much money, right? It's not like a High Guard situation where it's like a new... Like High Guard and Concord, what makes them a little different is like those are new studios.
Speaking of, I forgot I had a dog.
That were made with like, you know, funding from investors. And that's it. Like, you know, they get their $30 million to make a game and they shoot their shot. But a game like this, it's Bungie, bro. They fucking are backed by Sony. They have billions of dollars.
What are we doing?
To say it'll just die in 2 months, like even if they had 5 players, I don't think they would pull it. I really don't think they would pull it. It's just the sunk cost fallacy, right? You're just too invested at this point. You're not going to pull it.
So yeah, hearing his comments, you just got to go to the replies on this to get the answers, like people immediately pointing out, Concord was also backed by Sony. How did that work out? This user saying, he also thought Arc Raiders was Game of the Year, and then 3 months later, he thinks the game is dead. Shroud's opinion is as reliable as a weather forecast. This user saying, but Highguard was backed by Tencent, who has more money than Sony. This argument doesn't work. Concord was also backed by Sony. It's Bungie, bro. They're backed by Sony. They have billions of dollars. And of course, there's the bad news. But there's a big comparison being made. I think it's inevitable given the timing and the type of games we're talking about here. People are bringing up Highguard. Now, to make this very clear, we're dealing with Highguard, free-to-play, versus Bungie's Marathon, which is $40. Okay, it's not a direct comparison, but look at the state of Highguard that only released 6 weeks ago, 5-6 weeks ago. It's sitting at 290 in-game players. Again, free to play. So 290 people. That's it. That's all they could amass right now. And looking at the chart, I mean, this is probably the most brutal chart I think I've seen in quite some time, because similar to the day one numbers of Marathon, they got 97,000. Again, free to play, but still a lot of hype between both of these games. But look how Highguard ended up. Completely flatlining, losing a substantial portion of its audience from day one to day two, which we're seeing a pretty substantial amount with Marathon as well. Not quite this dramatic, but still losing about 25%. It's a pretty big deal from day one to day two. But the flatline is absolutely brutal. I mean, now just averaging hundreds of players. And despite games journalists trying their best, saying Highguard didn't flop, I cannot believe the audacity of this statement. They got hit with a note saying the developers of Highguard laid off most of their team, around 90% estimated, just 16 days after release. This makes it a flop. Brutal note. But yeah, not too unexpected. Highguard on their official Twitter account came out and said, Highguard's final update arriving soon. Thank you for playing with us. Today we're sharing difficult news. We have made the decision to permanently shut down Highguard on March 12th. Now they beat out Concord by a few weeks, but yeah, this game lasted, or is going to last, about 6 or 7 weeks. Absolutely brutal, especially for a free-to-play game. They had absolutely no faith in this. Tencent saw this and said, we're out. Later, buddy. We are not standing with this. This is an absolute disaster. And Jeff Keighley was one of the people to announce that Highguard would be going offline, and unfortunately, Jeff Keighley, he backed the wrong horse in this race here. He really got behind Highguard. It was the big trailer premiere at the Game Awards, and it got immediate bad reception. I mean, horrendous reception. And when the game was released, he said this, saying, in 48 hours, I'll be accepting your apologies. Oh, boy. As pointed out in these memes, guys, I'm worried about him, with a meme of him saying the Game Awards are canceled, nothing even matters now, blacking out his profile picture, and this getting 89,000 likes. But you know what, I'll say this, poorly aged things, that account said, I'm sorry, Jeff, and he would, in good fun, respond by acknowledging that this was a colossal failure. And this happens again despite every excuse being made by games journalists, saying Highguard is yet another symptom and victim of a rapidly decaying internet. I've never heard that one before as an excuse for a game failing. A rapidly decaying internet. That rapidly decaying internet doesn't seem to be affecting Slay the Spire 2 very much, but interesting try. And then we've heard a lot of excuses from the Highguard directors, and man, they made things a lot worse trying to cope literally from the moment this game dropped. And a Highguard director confirmed the game released without content as they were running out of time and money. Yeah, they're basically saying we were underfunded. I mean, come on. Seriously, that's the best you got? That you didn't have enough of a budget? I'm sure you had enough of a budget to make an enjoyable experience. This was an absolute disaster of a game. High Guard is definitely Concord 2. If you want to have that little... Where is it here? Let me pull it up. This little image right here. Yeah, these were abject failures. Will Concord 3, as some say, Bungie's Marathon, have a similar fate? Well, we don't know yet. It's going to take some time. But looking at things very generally right now, I don't really know. It's really on the fence, but things don't look great. The requests that reviewers hold off on things till it gets better, and the fact that we saw a pretty big drop from day 1 to day 2, and there's a lot of copium going around, and even some games journalists recognizing things aren't that great. It's not a good sign, at the very least, for a game that's going to have to sell probably somewhere between 7 to 11 million copies just to break even. But anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. As always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.